Alright, well, I want to see how close I need to be. So I got this piece of steel here. I'm just going to stick this underneath the back leg so that I can lower the front down onto the new foot without the whole thing wanting to tip like that in an exaggerated amount. Alright, so that's interesting. I've got the weight off of this and the foot's completely off the ground. So obviously that piece I put back there is too tall. Alright, let's see what else I can come up with. Alright, so now I've got, it's actually putting a little bit of weight, well, no, it's putting weight on the front leg, no weight on the back leg, and the bar that I have under there isn't much shorter than the space. Alright, so here's what I'm thinking now. What I'm going to do now is I got my level back on here. And what I'm going to do is I move my jack to the back. And I'm going to adjust the jack screw to try and get this close to level. And then I'm going to measure the distance that's under that leg right there. And try and find a spacer about that size. Yeah, so right now this back definitely needs to come up. Boy, that made a big difference. Quick. Alright, that looks good right there. So now let's see if we can figure out what size of spacer I need underneath here. That stack right there seems close enough. 387 thousandths over 1 inch. Here's an old armature from an electric motor. Wonder how hard this is. Oh, the memory card's filling up and I don't feel like going up and transferring files tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the shaft off. I'm going to face this end. And then I'm going to cut this off at the length that I need and use this as a big standoff underneath that leg. Alright, so last night I was down here and I was working on turning this thing into a couple of blocks that I can use to put underneath the legs. And the video card on the memory card on the camera filled up. And I kept working on it a little bit, and then the wife came down and asked whether or not I wanted to whether or not I'd be interested in watching a movie, and I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to take a break from this. So anyways, make a long story short, I stopped working on it, but I've now decided I really don't even want to use this thing at all, because it's, quite frankly, it's a mess. So apparently this is aluminum, but I don't know if it's just such soft aluminum or what, but it doesn't turn very well. Either that or maybe it's because it's laminated. I'm not sure what the deal is. But make a long story short, I'm going to bail out on using this, and I picked something up today that I'm going to use instead. So I stopped at a couple of places in the city today looking for a couple more of these kind of legs, and figured I'd just put, 4 on this thing. Couldn't find them anywhere, and then I happened to be going by a granite place, and I thought, I said, a piece of granite might be roughly the thickness that I need, and should definitely be able to be strong enough to handle being, the job of being basically a block under the leg, which is all I needed to do. So I stopped in, and sure enough, they had plenty of broken pieces that they didn't care if I took a couple. So I grabbed these. Ideally, I would have grabbed a pair that were identical, so they would be the same. So this is 195 thousandths over an inch, and this is 192 thousandths over an inch. These are actually pretty uniform thickness, so or close, I should say. So I wanted ideally 387 thousandths over, but I think I can make this work. Alright, so I had a couple of little thin plates of aluminum that I got in a scrap lot that I picked up at the flea market a few weeks ago, and put those underneath there, and that seemed to be pretty darn close. Alright, so bubble's too far over to the right now, so I've got to bring the front up. You can see how sensitive it is. So let's see if I can't do that by turning this adjusting nut in the front here. Kind of hard to see it from down there. I'll just move the wrench with my foot. Alright, nothing happened. Oops. I didn't move at all when I first did it, so I gave it a big turn and it moved the other way too much. Alright, so come back a little bit. That looks good right there. Alright, let's do the other side. Okay, so now I've got that side set up the same way. Got my adjustable leg in the front, and I've got my granite block with the aluminum shims in the back. And I've been going back and forth with the level and leveling it, and I'm pretty close now, but now I want to get it dead on. And the way I got to do that is I've got to make sure that I'm positioning the level in the same fashion at both ends, because the level is so sensitive that when I actually move the level in or out, it actually changes. So, in other words, if I'm getting a specific reading here like this, all I have to do is move this out that much and the bubble completely changes. Which tells me, I think that would indicate that this level has a bow in it. In other words, that this bottom is not perfectly flat. I'm not sure. I'm going to try my other level just for the heck of it. Alright, so this is my Starrett 18-inch level. This one's definitely in better physical condition than that old Pratt Whitney level, and it also is newer by the looks of it. So I figure what I'll do is move it back like this and zero it. Let's see. I guess it's this screw on this one. Oh no, it's these nuts over here. That level's a little trickier to adjust. To zero this level, you have to first unloosen this locking nut on the top, and then adjust the nut underneath here. Alright, that's right on. Then I assume you're supposed to tighten this locking on the top. Alright, so now, with that bubble set right in the middle, I'm going to slide the level towards me and see if this level does the same thing the other one did. Which I didn't expect. I wouldn't expect it to do that. And it doesn't. So what that suggests to me, that this level has a perfectly flat bottom, whereas the old Pratt & Whitney level has a bow to it. How that would happen, I don't know. But I do know that for my leveling of this lathe, this is the level I'm going to want to use. Alright, things are looking up. I put it in the same position at the tail end of the lathe, behind the tailstock, and it's right at zero, right where it just was in front of the tailstock. So that's looking good. And what I'm doing is I'm lining up this bubble right here with this top bridge at this top V-way. And to keep it perpendicular to the front, to the ways, I've basically got it right up against the back. Actually, I've got it at the very edge here of the V-ways. So now I'm just going to put it down the other end in roughly the same position, right in front of the headstock behind the chuck. So I've got it up against the side of the lathe is up against the front of the headstock, so that'll keep it perpendicular to the ways. I've got my vial here in line with the top of this V-way, and the bubble is dead on, right where it should be. So I'm now satisfied that I've got it leveled. Now I should be able to turn a piece and it should not turn a taper. What I want to do now is I want to turn a piece, but I don't want to support it with the tailstock, because if there's any error in the tailstock, because if the tailstock is set over a little bit, that'll cause it to turn a taper. So what I need to do is I need to turn a piece that sticks out from the chuck far enough so that I can get a measurement over a distance, but not so far that it's not supported well enough that it springs when the cutter is on it. So that's why you got to take really light cuts when you're doing these test pieces. Alright, so this is going to become my test piece. So normally you would never want to turn on a piece extended out this far from the chuck supporting it without center drilling and having a live or a dead center in the tailstock to support it. So this is going to be unsupported. So the problem is with turning this is, of course, you're putting pressure on it as it's cutting, and it's going to want to flex. I can actually even flex it with my fingers. I can actually see it move a little bit. So that's where the problem lies. So that's why for the cuts that we're going to make, we're going to have to make really light cuts. The first cut I'm going to make is, because this has got all of this rusted scale on it, is I'm going to take a decent sized cut just to true it all up. Then I'll come back and take a really light cut. And actually, I think before I take the light cut, I might even put a fresh, I might even put a fresh tip, or switch that tip around so there's a fresh tip to take the test cut. So for the cleanup cut though, I'm going to use the tip that's on here. Okay, after cleaning up the length of the rod, I ended up using my necking and cutoff tool, or my grooving and cutoff tool, to cut a couple of grooves to create a couple of collar areas. One down here near the chuck, and one further out. I'm not way out at the end here because this is so unsupported. This is such a long piece that way out here where it's unsupported, I can't even really get a good cleanup cut without it being an intermittent cut because of the fact that it's flexing so much there. So I've probably got maybe, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, maybe 5, 6 inches between the two collars. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my my dial on my cross slide here to determine where I've taken the how deep of a cut I've taken on this one, back the cutter out, come down this end and take another cut, same depth, and then mic the two collars, and they should match. If they don't match, then it means I'm still cutting a taper. But again, the key is on this collar over here, because it's so far out away from the chuck, and this is unsupported by a center, then I've got to take a very light cut here to ensure that I don't end up with an error due to the flexing of the shaft, and as opposed to an actual twist in the bed. All right, just for the heck of it, before I do anything, I'm just curious how out of whack these two collars are. That's 965.5, and that's 980. Yeah, 980. So let's see if we can't take a couple light cuts and see if we can't get this thing to even out. If I can't, then I'm going to probably try and find some other material that is a little more free machining than whatever this rod was. When I get close to it, I'm going to use my micrometer, but for right now I'm just using the calipers because I'm still a mile away from where I need to be. Alright, so it's going to take a light 5/1000 cut. I think I'll get the feed rate down. Length, Much finer feed, but increase the RPMs. I still got about 18 thousandths to go. All right, so that's at 25 thousandths past zero. 940 and a half. 959 and a half. Almost 960. Question is, am I still turning taper? Or is this just flexing too much? You can see I'm not getting a very good finish over here compared to over here. Stupid camera shut off. Alright, the fact that I can't get a good finish out here compared to here, the fact that I'm still 15 thousandths over here, even though I turn the cutter in the same distance for both of these collars, and I'm pretty sure that my bed is level, so I'm beginning to think that my problem is this front bearing, the bearing clearance on the spindle bearing. Alright guys, I just unplugged the lathe for safety's sake. And I released all the tension on the big flat leather belt going to the cone. And I can grab this bar. I can hear the movement. I don't even need the indicator on there to tell me I've got more than 2 thousandths on there, I'd be willing to bet. Alright, so I've got my Mitutoyo indicator set up. I've got the base on the V-ways, the rear V-ways behind the chuck, so you can't see it, but I'm indicating off the rigidness of the bed instead of the carriage. Not that that should make much of a difference. And let me zoom in here. I've got my point riding right at the top edge of that collar, right behind where the chuck mates up to the spindle. That's down. That's up. That's about 3 thousandths at least. Well guys, that was quite a few episodes ago that I did this shimming over here on this thing. When I got this lathe, for those of you who haven't seen all of my episodes, when I got this lathe and I originally had this all apart, there were no shims inside these bearing, between these bearing caps and the headstock. And it seemed like when I would tighten it up that it would bind. So I surmised that at some point somebody had this apart and lost the shims, and that it should be shimmed to the correct, you know, amount. And obviously what I put in there, even though I did the whole test with the bar in there and the indicator, was too much. So I just slid out the shims that I had in the front here, and I had a total of 3 shims. So I had, the shim stock I had must have been 3 thousandths. I had 2 pieces of the shim stock, so that's 3 thousandths and 3 thousandths, and then I had this big spacer in there, which is 41 thousandths. So I think the big spacer is going to have to be in there. Question is, how much do I want to pull out right off the bat? Well, let me see what I got in the back side. I should have the same amount in the back. I do believe I at least tried to have the same amount of shim on both sides. Now the cap's still on there too tight on the back side to let me. Alright, I need a soft mallet to give that thing a whack. That allows the whole cap to tilt forward a little bit, and that should allow me to pull out these shims in the back. This should be too tight when I do this, but just for the heck of it, let's pull the two 3 thousandths shims out. What if I put that one in upside down? Yep, that's what I did. Had it in upside down. I had cut these exactly so they fit. And it's supper time. Well, I'll oil this up and test it when I come back down after supper. Alright, I just tightened up that front bearing cap with the two smaller shims removed. Just left the big shim in there. And I can pull up on this bar. Still get some deflection, so I know there's clearance in there. But now, looks like I can get a max of about 2 to 3, which might even still be a little bit high. I wonder how it runs. Well, I'll make sure I get some oil in there before I try it. I just filled this can, so get the air out of the pump. Alright. And then I actually read about a gentleman who ran a lathe like this in his younger years, and talked about how when he took over the job from the guy who was doing the job before him, who was an old timer, he passed on some wisdom, and he said one of the things that he told him to do, he says every time you oil a lathe, he said oil the spindles like this, he said give it a little bit of a turn manually before you power it up, just to give I guess that oil a little bit of a better chance to distribute itself. And I don't know whether or not that really makes a difference or not, but I'm sure it doesn't really harm anything, so why not do it? Alright, I've still got the belt kind of loose, so I'm curious whether or not this would actually still... Well, the switch is... Alright, I guess I'll leave it unplugged until I get that belt tension up. I'll run it a few minutes and then shut it off and feel the bearing, see if it's warm. So I ran it for about 5 minutes and then shut it down, and the bearing doesn't feel like it's warming up at all, so that's good. I'm just curious whether or not anything's changed here, deflection wise. So if I push down on the rod that's in there, I can, actually it's not zeroed. If I push down, I can go to -1,000th, and if I pull up as hard as I can go to 2. So that's 3,000ths total. So that's still too much, according to what I read in the, I believe it was How to Tend a Lathe was the name of the book by South Bend, which actually had instructions on how to set the bearing clearance for this thing. Or, actually not for my Vernon, but for a South Bend lathe with these type of bearings. So it said 1 to 2,000th. So I think I'm still too loose.